Good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's good to have you with us. Assuming most of you are probably still joining us from home. So thank you so much for making some time to catch up about landing pages for this month's Eloqua group. So we've got quite a bit to get through. We'll spend a little bit of time on the platform as well, showing you a few examples and some other components that relate to landing pages. First thing we want to cover off, though, is why Eloqua landing pages. And if your organization is not using them to the extent that they could be today, we want to try and understand why that is and potentially look at some solutions to help you get a bit more use case out of them. From there, we'll move on to the fact that there are really many ways you can use them. Understanding their intended use, I suppose, is also part of that process. Creating an on-brand experience. So we certainly want to make sure that the Eloqua landing pages, for the most part, look identical to your website or your CMS. So we'll walk through that a little bit. And we have a few exciting pieces of information for you for the Release 20B, which takes place in May, middle of next month. So we'll get onto that as well, so you can have a bit of an update on what's happening there. So my name is Derek Bell. I'm the Director of Customer Success and Marketing at Marketing Cube, and I'm your host today. And Jason O'Donnell is also online, and Jason's helping us with Q&A and any of the chat functions that come through. So please feel free, if you think of a question, don't wait till the end. Just go ahead and throw that into the Q&A or use the chat function, and we'll be more than happy to potentially answer those as we move through, but we may share those with the rest of the team as well. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. It was interesting this month. I think there's a combination of things at play. One is that many of us are working from home and are probably looking for opportunities to educate ourselves and maybe upskill ourselves with some time that we may have on our hands. So this month, I just wanted to share with you where our user group registrants come from. And so you can see the vast majority are certainly from Australia or New Zealand, but there's also a mix from our friends throughout Asia, the Middle East, and also North America and Europe. So thank you for joining us. Most of those folks, I imagine, in North America and Europe watch us on replay. So thank you, guys. One of the other questions we ask, though, when people register for the user group, and from time to time, we ask the question when you actually register for the individual monthly user group sessions, is to get some sort of an idea as to how frequently you're using Eloqua as an individual user, that is. And so you'll see, for instance, that the vast majority are what we would describe as a power user, but there's also a portion of people who don't use Eloqua. So it means their organization is probably using Eloqua, but they're personally not logging into the platform. And then we have light users and frequent users. So one thing we're thinking about, and we'll be seeking some feedback from you in the coming weeks and months on this one, is do we potentially look at a slightly separate type of user group? You know, this user group has always been very much designed to service the needs of Eloqua users who are using the platform on a daily basis and providing them with, in some cases, some in-depth information and knowledge, but also looking at strategy as well. But if you're not using Eloqua, but your organization is using Eloqua, maybe that's a slightly different discussion. So we'll be in touch to try and get some feedback from you as to kind of what you're thinking about that. We had a couple of questions drop in this month, one from Tim, excuse me, here in Surrey Hills. He says, how can we personalize the content of the landing pages, i.e. have a paragraph of text, depending on which segment they're in? The answer to that, Tim, is not so much based on which segment they're in, but it would be based on which profile information you have on the individual contact. Dynamic content, regardless of how you present it, whether it's in an email or on a landing page, because it's identical, so the rules are the same. It would be based on profile information. So if you look at a whole group of contacts, if they have New South Wales as their state, or maybe they have Singapore as their country, or you can alter imagery, you can alter copy, etc. All those things can be altered to match. So the question is perfectly valid, except for that point there, not really based on the segment. And when you say segment, I'm thinking Oracle Eloqua segment from the platform. If you mean differently to that, that's fine. Perhaps use the chat function to let us know. But yeah, absolutely, you can change anything on a landing page or email just as you would, anything on a landing page just as you would an email, with personalized content, dynamic content, field merges, those sorts of things. There was another question Also relating to specifically to landing pages, can landing pages be optimized for SEO as part of a wider web strategy? That's from Jasmine here in Sydney. So Jasmine, it possibly comes back to understanding the purpose of the landing page, functionality within Eloqua, and generally, not always the case, but generally speaking, Eloqua landing pages are temporary in nature. If you look at the process of you registering for this month's webinar, you reached our April registration page. You would have seen then the April confirmation page. But once today's finished, those assets are done and dusted. There is no optimization needed. So can they be optimized? Well, yes, of course they can be optimized, and you can make changes to Eloqua landing pages immediately. Once you've saved the landing page and assigned a URL to it, it's live on the internet. As quick as that. So from an optimization point of view, you can certainly make changes to it. Does it plug in then to something like Maximizer and those other sorts of platforms? Well, yes, it can. But it would then again depend, as I said, on the type of landing page. Is it temporary in nature, or is it a more long-term type of page? And if it's a long-term type of page, then it might be worthwhile asking the question, is Eloqua the best place for it? Or perhaps, is it more, would it be better suited to a CMS environment? But the short answer is yes. Now, I notice here there are going to be a few questions in chat. Let's have a look. Okay, so Tim clarified when he said segment, yes, he meant industry segment. So sure, absolutely. So that's an easy one then, Tim. As long as we have industry captured either at the contact or the account level of the individual contact sitting in Eloqua, absolutely. We did that recently ourselves for a webinar where we altered the opening paragraph depending on the seniority of the marketer. It just made a bit more sense to talk to a senior marketer, sort of the CMO marketing director, versus the individual contributor or marketing manager, for example. And we just did that based on job category, which is a field that we use within the platform. So you can do exactly the same thing based on industry, country, state, whichever. So absolutely. Gina asked, do you confirm registration details on landing page, given you can use merge fields to personalize the date time based on the form submission, or is best practice to confirm via email confirmation? Hey, Gina. So no, I choose not to, or we choose not to at Marketing Cube. Look, I suppose we're a bit of a boutique agency. We're not receiving thousands of form submissions, and so we genuinely look at each of those individually as they come in. So as new contacts come into the database via various form submissions, we look at those very closely. And 99% of the time, it's perfectly legitimate. Sometimes if it's a Gmail, we just do a little bit of research to see if we can find the individual. But look, it's certainly what you're describing is fairly common in a B2C environment, that validation process. But I suppose we validate it by virtue of the next email we send out. So pretty much any form submission that we send, the email will be sent out, like a confirmation email would be sent out. And we just go straight to the confirmation email. Now, if that hard bounces and look, I don't think in nearly 7 or 8 years of working here at Marketing Cube, I've ever had anybody come back to us and say, hey, I didn't fill in that form. That's not me. But again, that's potentially a bit unique to our business, types of relationships we have with people. But yeah, hopefully, competitor registrations, again, if they're being completely above board, they'll obviously use their work email. And that's fine. Sometimes in scenarios, we've actually picked up the phone and called those people just to clarify what they're looking for and other ways that we can help, of course. But, once they go to Gmail or something, you're completely oblivious to who it is really. So it's a hard one to work on. All right. So let's jump into why Eloqua landing pages. So why? Well, a couple of key benefits. They're quick to build. They're live in minutes. You can take them down very quickly, literally just flick of a switch and they're offline, which is good. And you can personalize them. That's one of the key things. So you can present the dynamic context, sort of going back to Tim's point earlier. So you can adjust what people see on the landing page based on the profile information that you have about that person. Talking with Adrian Jones, our CEO this morning, he said, the nirvana state is that every single landing page should be unique. Which is a very lofty goal, but in principle, he's right. I mean, at the most basic level, when we present a confirmation page to people, we should at least be saying, thank you, Derek, or thank you, Mary, thank you, Jenny, whatever the case may be, at its most basic. They've just given you the information in the form. There's no reason why you can't thank them for that process. Let's jump in and have a closer look. So I just wanted to ask you a poll question, because we do hear from customers sometimes, there are different barriers or reasons as to maybe why they're not using Eloqua landing pages to the degree that they could be. And so we're just trying to gauge from you what some of those reasons might be. Okay, we have a question. Okay, so Samantha, just while people are finishing off that poll, there's still a few of you to go. Samantha makes a comment, I think, adding to the question from Gina above in relation to when people submit the form, do we send them an email to confirm their email address? And by the way, there are plenty of Eloqua customers that do that and sort of have that built into their process, as I indicated that we choose not to. It's more about the form submission data and the mapping of that data to the lead's profile through the update rules. And look, I think that's a really valid comment, especially potential. Well, everyone's industry is a little bit different. In higher education, for example, you often will have multiple profiles of prospective students, alumni, etc. And one of the difficulties there is which email address, etc., and trying to associate it to. So update rules can give you a little bit more, a better chance of updating the right contact. And I suppose sending that email to people to confirm who they are is a way to help minimize that. If you wanted to explore that further, I'm sure we could have a chat and look at ways to assist you in doing that. Okay, so the number one reason is we really don't know how to get the most out of landing pages. Well, I suppose then the onus is on me to help you with that one. So let's jump in and have a closer look. For various reasons today, I'm working off one screen, which is really quite disconcerting when I'm used to doing two screens, so please bear with me. Okay, so let's come back. Let's take a step back and think about landing pages first of all. And they really were never designed or meant to replace a CMS or your website. That's certainly not the objective. And I have over the years had customers say to us, well, could we just use Eloqua to build our website? And I'm like, no, huge red flag, don't do it. Okay, so Eloqua's landing page functionality is not a CMS. It's not designed to be a CMS. And it doesn't give you all of those neat little functions that you'll find in the back of WordPress or more enterprise level style CMSs. It really is, as the name suggests, it's a landing page. And I think if I'm got enough gray hair and go back far enough, one of the original intents of landing pages was that businesses found that simply sending people to their homepage, or once they got a little bit more savvy, sending people to a page within their website, people got distracted. They saw the top line menu and all the pretty buttons, and so your primary call to action was lost because of all the distractions that the website presented. So then the concept of the landing page arrived, and it morphed beautifully into applications like Eloqua, where obviously we've got the email component driving people. Well, then why don't we create this landing page function where we can then very much focus a person's behavior when they reach that landing page? You could almost argue that the only reason they should be able to get off that page is because they fill in the form. Now, of course, you'll need to probably have a link to your privacy policy and maybe a phone number and those sorts of things, but everything else can be minimized so that the primary focus is on the form and the conversion of that form. That should really be it. So some of the key benefits of landing pages. Initially, when I started to put this together, I was thinking about the application of landing pages. So I had to rewind and come back to so why would you actually use landing pages over the website or the CMS? One of the big ones, and this comes back to Tim's question at the very beginning, and Tim, you can see their bullet points 1 and 2, is the ability to personalize those landing pages, that you can use field merges. Just think about it in the same way that you do an email. The same as you do in an email, you can do the same on a landing page. So we can personalize and include information, either the person's company name, their name, geographical information pulled from their address, and then of course using dynamic content to alter images. So images on the page might be reflective of certain industries, potentially as well. Dynamic content, the same thing. So keeping in mind that dynamic content, you can present different images, different copy, etc., either based on the contact or from a custom data object as well. So you've got a few options there. One of the other nice things is coming in May, which, excuse me, we'll talk to you about a little bit in just a moment. In May, we have a new YouTube and Vimeo embed app coming for landing pages, which will make that process easier. You've always been able to do it. You know that you obviously access the user group replays, and they're all embedded onto Eloqua landing pages. Question here from Trudy, might be a question for later, but is it possible to have a secure landing page on Eloqua to give people confidence when inputting sensitive information? And the answer is absolutely yes. So what Trudy's asking about is SSL, and yes, here's a slide I prepared earlier, but we'll get to that in just a moment. The other nice thing is that pages can be live in minutes. If you're using a template, that obviously speeds that process. If you're starting with a blank sheet of paper, as in a blank page, and you've got to add everything to it, well, that clearly just requires a bit more time. But in fact, all a landing page needs is a subdomain, and then you add what's called a pretty URL, and that's it. You're live on the internet. So it might just be a blank white page at that point, but it's live immediately, and you can take it down just as quickly as you put it up as well. So if it's very temporary in nature, you can take care of that. Then some of the reasons that we hear people tell us that they can't use or choose not to use Eloqua landing pages to the degree that perhaps they want is that, we need an on-brand page, or we've just always used the website. That's how we've always done it. Or IT says we have to use the website. Well, I can share my opinions on that comment, but anyway, we need to be able to take pages down easily, and you can. Eloqua landing pages aren't secure, e.g. no SSL. So again, as much as it's go with Trudy, that's not the case. So can we style the pages? Absolutely, you can style the pages. And does Eloqua have landing pages? I have been asked that question by an Eloqua customer. All right. So let's some light facts, and I'll add some more here. So the key ones were that, yes, CSS, and CSS is that magic stuff that you use to create all the branding across your website. That CSS can be added to your Eloqua landing pages as well. So that way, from a visual point of view, the fonts and the colors and the buttons and all those sorts of things can be absolutely reflective of your website and your CMS. So there's no problem there. You can take pages down in minutes, and SSL can and probably should be added to your landing pages. We'll explore the SSL further in just a few minutes. But my general response is when people ask what can be done, the answer is generally yes. It's they're very flexible. I mean, some customers over the years I've noted, they seem to have this preconceived idea that, oh, well, it's an Eloqua landing page, so we can't really quite do what we want it to do. Guys, you have two options. You've got the HTML, so the source editor, and you've also got the design editor. If we look at the source editor, which is HTML, it's HTML. You can do whatever you need it to do. It can be whatever color, whatever shape, size, integrate with whatever your website integrates with. So there is no limitation from that point of view. And it's not that there's no limitation, there's just more options, which is even better. Things like dynamic content and field merges and all that level of personalization that can't be achieved generally on a CMS. Okay, so let's look at some different case studies and some examples to sort of get you thinking about where you could use your Eloqua landing pages. So let's have a look again. To what degree are you personalizing landing pages today? And it may be that it's not even just to do with landing pages. It could be that the same question could apply even to your emails as well. Oh, we have a question from Josh. Hi, Josh. And do you have any examples from a lead generation perspective before you have any contact data on a lead, how a landing page can be personalized? Yeah, good question, Josh. So look, at the end of the day, if the contact doesn't exist in Eloqua, and when I say a contact, I mean we have an email address with at least a first name, potentially maybe a company name or something. If we don't have a contact with an email address, then there's nothing for the dynamic content or custom data objects to in fact render. Now, I understand there are some third-party plugins and apps that you can add to Eloqua to help with that, and Eloqua does hold on to IP addresses. So if somebody reaches your page or an Eloqua landing page, same as your website, Eloqua holds onto the IP address, and it does hold on to the page visits, etc. And then at some point, once that person does disclose who they are via a form submission, so it would be via a form submission, then that historical behavior is then attached to now what is a known user. But fundamentally, if we don't have any information, there's nothing for the dynamic content to present. That's why one of the golden rules with dynamic content is you must always create a default view. So in the absence of an individual not meeting the rule criteria that you set up, there's always a default to go with that. Josh, it may be that we can take that one offline a little bit more for you and help you with an answer to that one. Okay, let's have a look. So it's pretty tight on this one, but 39% of people are not using that personalization at all at this stage. So let's jump in and have a closer look. All right, so limited by your imagination. So lead capture. So we have a customer who we've had for a long, long time, and when they purchased Eloqua, it was actually landing pages. That was the primary reason they purchased Eloqua. And this would have been 2006, I think it might have been, a little bit earlier, maybe 2005. And the challenge they had was they were running a bunch of banner ads, which everybody was doing in 2005. And it took forever for their international support team to actually build landing pages with forms that they could capture as leads. So one of the primary reasons they jumped onto Eloqua was because of the speed at which they could now do it, and not just do it, but do it domestically, do it quickly, and just respond so much faster. So lead capture is certainly one of the biggest exercises, or one of the biggest reasons you can want to use the landing pages, because it comes back to that very first point that we talked about, is we don't want to send people off to the website necessarily, because they can very much get lost in amongst all of the other noise that's happening on the website. So we want to try and contain the experience and really drive people to fill in that form so that you can capture that information and start talking to them. Different use cases. So what have we seen with different people using Eloqua landing pages for? And this is probably, people come up with all sorts of really cool ideas. For example, we have one customer who's in the exhibition industry. What they needed to do was to be able to provide a landing page where people wanting to buy exhibition space could actually look and see immediately live what was free and what was available via different 2 square meters, 10 square meters, square, rectangular, whatever the case may be. And so we built a Eloqua landing page for them to do that, which was secure. People had to log in, I think, or had to get to a form to get to it. So there's multiple applications. These are by far the more common ones. So we talked about lead capture, thought leadership. Don't give your thought leadership away. There are so many websites that I go to that provide amazing, really high quality information, and I just click and download the PDF. They've got no idea who I am. So I think giving everything away is not a good idea. Putting everything behind a gate is probably not the best idea. And it's about that happy medium. It's about potentially giving people the opportunity to give you a little bit of information, or as our CEO likes to call it, a fair and equitable trade of informational data. So you give us a little bit and we'll give you something in return. Event registration is certainly a big one. So from an event point of view, most people on the phone, or on the phone, what is it, 1985? Most people on Zoom today would be using Eloqua to help with event registration. Preference centers is another really good one. Instead of simply, I had a bit of a nightmare experience this week with a UK vacuum cleaner company and an Australian clothing brand, just in relation to the ridiculous way that they treat you via email, and when you're trying to hone what it is you're actually trying to hear about, they don't let you. It's all over. You're unsubscribed and you're gone. So a little bit of frustration there. Microsites is another one. So So there's a question here, and Samantha, can I suggest maybe use the Q&A function instead of the chat function? If you use the Q&A function, people can actually respond to you as well. So Samantha's asking what kind of apps are best for event registrations based on what other users use. So the vast majority of Eloqua customers will just simply use Eloqua to do that. Now, there are some apps available in the Cloud App Store to assist you with that. We do have a couple of clients using Eventbrite, and there's an Eventbrite is good because it covers the whole e-commerce piece. So completely separate to Eloqua, but from your point of view, it certainly manages that whole e-commerce piece for you, which is kind of nice and seamless. But if you're doing free events, well, you don't get charged anything from Eventbrite. So there are a few options there. Eventbrite, I think, is probably, well, there's so many aspects to event. You know, is it just ticketing you're after, or are you after something that's going to help you manage the entire event with venues and catering and trestle table and tent hire, and do you need something for accommodation and flights to create microsites to present people with all of that information? Then you would be looking at something like Cvent, which is an amazing tool, but there's all sorts of things to do. So is it ticketing? Is it ticketing with e-commerce? Is it actual event management? There's probably a little bit more to it than that, but you'll find a range of things on the Oracle Cloud Marketplace to give you a bit more information there. But jump onto Q&A. So it looks like you jumped onto Q&A, and Gina wants to see an example of a preference center, and I can definitely show you that. You can actually access ours, Gina, in most of our emails. All right, so this is one example. This is very simple. This is Oracle have asked me so many questions over the years. They clearly have nothing left to ask me. So it's right down to business email now. That's pretty much all I get from them. But there are a whole range of things you can do. You can do something like this, for instance, and then the next screen you see actually presents more questions. I personally think I don't like that personally. It's like, okay, you asked me for one thing. Oh, now you want 25 other things. Yeah, nah, forget it. So just be upfront would be my suggestion, but whatever you think works best for your business, but we can certainly play around and do something like that. So that's one example. This is one of our marketing cubes. This is using the design editor. So all drag and drop, just very simple. Try and remove as many distractions as possible, the white paper, the form, a little bit of information, and then details about our privacy policy, etc. Then this one was actually built by Marketing Cube for our friends at American Express, and this is actually displayed on an iPad sitting inside the Qantas Club. So the idea is that you start with the blue button there, which says next, and you'll go through. It presents you with a couple of different questions. Are you a card holder? Yes or no? And I think I said yes in this case. So here what they're doing is just helping me understand how I can learn more about the card, for instance. So it's just a little bit of a nice and simple form, but just a nice simple experience. And they're apparently just lying around the Qantas Club, although I imagine the Qantas Club is in mothballs at the moment, like most airline clubs. But yeah, so another application, sort of thinking outside the box a little bit. It may not be that people will always reach the form necessarily via email. You might think about this sort of scenario when you're doing expos or trade shows or anything like that. You can make it a little bit more engaging for people in order to fill in some information. Maybe it's a competition if it's at a trade show. So a few options there to play with. So this is more of a splash page, really, splash page, microsite, probably more of a splash page. And this is really just a page we put together that we share with customers from time to time that is just a summary of some of the more popular user groups. So it's sort of just nice and visual, nice and clear, a little bit of opportunity to offer people to subscribe to other bits and pieces in that process. But another example. So let me show you a couple of others that we put together. So in a joint campaign that we ran with Oracle, This one's actually live at the moment. So this is our marketing automation webinar series for 2020. And so each of these various sections relate to individual webinars. So the next being the 14th of May, for example. And so you can see they go all the way through to July, September, and November. So the first one's already happened, and that's here. And so what we do each month or each webinar when it concludes, we basically move the next webinar to the top of the list. And this is all code free, remember, it's just drag and drop. And we just move it up, and then we drop the most recent one down the bottom, change the button so it doesn't say register now. If we go back down here, we've got access the replay, and then you're off and running. Blog posts. So this one was actually very targeted. This was a blog post would normally sit on our CMS as a part of our blog, but this particular blog post was written for our top of funnel nurturing campaign. So if you're on the call today and you're not a customer of Marketing Cubes, but you might be a customer of Oracle's, there's every chance you may have seen this potentially. So what we wanted to do here was just something nice and simple, with some reading, obviously, because there's some points to be made there. Here we've provided a call to action. And so it's just another way to consider, instead of us sending people to the CMS, so why did we choose to do this on an Eloqua landing page? A couple of reasons. One is we wanted to personalize it. So if you actually read through that blog post, there's language, etc., that has been altered to make it sound as though it's very much tailored to you. Basic things like the person's name, also their company name, and a few other bits and pieces as well. And then at the bottom, a call to action to access some additional guides. Okay, so Josh asked the question in relation to that American Express. No, Josh, that's just Eloqua Landing Pages. That's all that is. So it's not an app. It's just multiple landing pages. So when people hit next, it just loads the next page. So it's even easier than that. So Michael asked the question, a page built in Eloqua, for example, in the blog post can be found via Google search. Yes, Michael, there are configurations at the back end of Eloqua that your administrator can possibly point out to you that should have been done when your instance was actually set up, where you actually add your GA account number, etc., to the Eloqua instance. And so, yes, your Google will be crawling over those. The only challenge you've got, of course, is that many landing pages, as I talked about before, are temporary in nature. You will always have some that are potentially always on, but they're often temporary in nature. So it's the only thing to factor into that. And Gina's preference center. So yes, we'll get to that for you, Gina. And then there was a joint campaign that we did with our friends at Oracle. And so this is the events. This was actually right on the cusp of this was going to be a face-to-face event, which then turned into being a webinar just as COVID-19 sort of hit the world stage. So what this does, basically, it just has a basic tab structure. But again, this is not anything overly fancy. That's one page, and this one, the registration, is actually a whole other page. So all it is a button with copy in it and respective hyperlinks to the two different landing pages. So the secret when creating something like a microsite is to lock down what you want the banner experience to look like, and then use that as your almost like a little sub template, so to speak, so that you can come up with a nice, simple microsite. If you've got an annual conference or something, something like an annual conference would be a perfect candidate for this type of a format. Temporary in nature, but on brand and delivered quickly, very quickly, in fact. So now the other request was to look at our preference center. You can do that from our website. If you go to subscribe today under contact us, most people reach the preference or our preference center because of an invitation via email, etc. So we've elected to do it in 3 different stages. Not all of these are required, but some of these are required. So we hit next. Then we offer up subscriptions. So here people can subscribe or unsubscribe to those different things. And then the final stage is helping us understand what interests you. And so you can tick on these relevant areas or untick them should you choose to, with the usual opt-ins, etc., and save preferences. And so that's done. And so as a part of that, they'll receive a confirmation email saying, thank you very much for sharing the information or updating your details, etc. And then what that does in the background for us is it updates both the contact and also a custom data object with some information that they've shared. The actual subscriptions are email groups, and then we use other areas of Eloqua to help us hone and tailor that information in a bit more detail. So Jenna, go along to our website and you'll be able to see that in a bit more detail. Okay. So the other question that often comes up from people is, well, how do we get our Eloqua landing pages to look like our website? So as we talked about earlier, CMS or CSS, it can be added to your Eloqua landing pages. But the CSS it's the magic. It's the HTML code that does all the magic to help you deliver that on-brand experience. It helps you get buttons looking the way you want them, forms, etc., all of those sorts of things. So there should be very little, from a visual point of view, there should be very little difference between moving from a website, your website, to your Eloqua landing pages. So the smartest way to do that is templates. So as an average user, I would consider myself an average user, certainly when it comes to anything to do with JavaScript and CSS, etc. But that stuff can live within the template itself. So as a user, I don't have to do anything. I simply go to my template library, find my relevant template that I want, access it, put in my copy, all that sort of fun stuff, save it, and it's done. When I view it online, it is ready to go. So I can see that it's on brand. That's the smartest way to do it. Now, the team at Marketing Cube can obviously help you with that. Now, the SSL side of things, first of all, I think most of us understand what SSL is, maybe not what it does, but certainly what it is. The whole situation has really been brought on us by Google. And Google or Alphabet have basically decided that they want anyone using their browsers to be secure. Now, the whole point originally of SSL, in my limited understanding, was really about securing information, personal details, etc., and certainly credit card information that might be going backwards and forwards. But just simply having a landing page that has no e-commerce functionality or has no form on it, for example, Google are telling us everyone still has to have SSL. Otherwise, what happens is you get a bit of a bad experience. But to try and help you understand a little bit about the basics, right? So if we have someone on the internet on the left and your database is over on the right-hand side, then someone fills in a form and that information is transferred through the internet to your database. But the problem is there can be bad people along the way, and those bad people along the way can rip data out of forms or rip credit card details out of form submissions, etc. So SSL becomes a way to get rid of the bad people, hopefully, and put a nice big secure padlock in between that process. So now, when you submit that form on a site that has SSL, it securely moves directly from the form directly to the server, and there's no way for that information to be hacked in along the way. So that's the importance, and that's why you probably should avoid providing credit card information over a website that doesn't have SSL. So what you're trying to avoid is this sort of an experience. So I imagine most of you on the line today have potentially had this experience over the last sort of 12, 18 months or 2 years. And that's certainly something that you don't want people to have that experience when they click on your Eloqua email in order to get to your Eloqua landing page. You don't want Chrome delivering this experience along the way. So how do you avoid that? So adding SSL to Eloqua has something that's been able to be done for a long time. It's now obviously clearly more popular based on what our friends at Google are doing. It's linked to your subdomain. So I've got there as an example, events at Marketing Cube or products at Marketing Cube, and they're two subdomains. So an SSL certificate would be required for each one. So the ability to add that SSL is something that can be done with Eloqua, and it's considered an add-on, although in recent time, Eloqua has changed the rules a little bit, and your subscription actually includes one of these, which is going to be perfect for the vast majority of customers. So the only thing you need to do then is actually purchase an SSL certificate, which ranges, as I've said there, between $300 and $400. My understanding is too, and I'm a little bit out of my depth from a technical point of view here, but you can't just recycle. So for instance, but we've already got one on the website, can't we just use that? No, I don't believe you can. So just our support team can help you with that. And so Marketing Cube can install that add-on for you, and also the certificate for a fee. So Jason, who's on the line today, can assist with that. We're finding most customers now are realizing that they need to do this. Personally, I think it's a bit annoying that Google have imposed it on us, which is really, that's the frustration. But such is life, unfortunately. Alrighty, so hopefully that's given you a little bit of context. So what I've tried to cover there was some of the key areas, the concerns and objections that people often have when it comes to landing pages. SSL is one of those. The styling of the page, for instance, making sure that our Eloqua landing pages look the same as the website, that's also key. So hopefully we've been able to cover some of that, give you some ideas for why you would use them: event registration, lead capture, thought leadership, microsites, annual conferences, those sorts of things. All perfect examples and good use cases for landing pages. Let's dive in now and have a look at what's coming up in the next release. That information on screen there is really just a, this is the problem with only having one screen. I'm looking at messages. So Gina says, when sharing the landing page via social, e.g. LinkedIn, can the page banner be the cover image of the link, as I couldn't get it to work? So Gina, yes, it absolutely can. There's a little bit of coding required, and you need to have some sort of social sharing option in place to do that. Jason, maybe if I can just ask Jason to flag that one, because there are a couple of things that we can point out, and maybe I'll try and cover that off in the blog as well for you. And Trudy, yes. So Trudy, let's just quickly. So Trudy's question is about vanity URLs. So in this particular example, I've chosen a microsite which we have, which is actually called Oracle Joint Campaigns. And then that's the vanity URL right there, Trudy. So I can type in there whatever I want to type in there. And here it shows me what the full URL would actually look like. And so you can see it there in the browser. So oracle.marketingcube.com.au is the subdomain, or what it calls the microsite. And then that right there is the vanity URL. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so what's coming? There's some really cool stuff coming, guys. One of the pieces that's coming is blocks. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Okay, well, I'll explain in a bit more detail in a minute what blocks looks like. I've got some screenshots to share with you as well. One of the other things that's going to be, I think, very helpful is the ability to archive individual forms. This is part of an ongoing project with the product team to look at developing and enhancing this whole archive function. The archive function will be great because it enables you to take forms away from general visibility, which means people won't use them by mistake. They won't try and recycle them or save as. And often forms are very, very highly configured to often do very specific tasks. And if someone does a save as, it can sometimes just create more grief than it needs be. They should really just be starting life from a template. So that will be good. It avoids you having to create some silly folder called archive. There's actually more of a robust process to do it. And it means you don't have to delete, which in many cases you can't delete them anyway. I mentioned earlier as well, the new app that's coming for Vimeo and YouTube, which I think will really enhance that experience on the landing page. At the moment, there is an app and it's functional, but I just think it misses a few things. So I'm really keen to have a look. I've not seen yet, but I'm keen to have a look at this, this new app. Optimize mobile experiences. So this is something that customers have been asking for, which is the ability to hide cells in mobile or in desktop view and to optimize the experience across different screens. So this comes back to an earlier question around optimization, which this is just one part of optimization, obviously not everything. And then the HTML to go function, the ability to export the HTML of an email or landing page will be generally available, which is good news. So what is blocks? So you'll notice in that screenshot that there's a new tab at the top of the email editor called blocks. And so blocks become these pre-built sections that you can then drop into the body of your email. If you have repetitive assets that you're adding to emails over time, then this could be an option. Now, this doesn't replace shared content, enhances shared content, and there'll be all sorts of controls, but here's another screenshot for you. So just another example, another piece that you would grab another block and bring that block into place. Key questions I found people have hopefully answered here on this slide. So how do they work? So your blocks are created in the editors themselves. You don't create them externally or sort of in another part of Eloqua. They're actually created in the editors themselves. And your ability to create those blocks will be based on your user profile. And the ability to edit can also be controlled. So a block may be something that I can drop into an email, but that's it. I can't change the URL. I can't change the font. I can't swap the image out. I can't do anything to it. It's just fixed. Or I might be able to change the URL, or I might be able to change the color of the button, those sorts of things. Or maybe I can swap out the image. So you will have control. Now, the key thing, and this is something that came up through the testing process, once you add a block to an asset, you have actually severed the connection to the block library. Now, that's important because it's now a unique asset attached to that one email, and that very specifically also relates to any URLs that are sitting in that block. If we didn't sever the connection, you would get very vague reporting of asset performance. Whereas here, you'll have asset performance based on its engagement in that particular email. So that's a good thing. So blocks can also contain dynamic content, and they can also be multiple width and field merges as well, sorry. So personalization, of course. And you could have multiple column widths. So you might, looking at your email today, you might have a banner, and then you might have two columns underneath that, and then maybe one column at the bottom for the button or something. So you can mix those together to create blocks. So we have a client in New Zealand at the moment who has been playing with blocks as a bit of a beta period. And so far the feedback has been fantastic. There's actually a couple of features that I've outlined there that are coming in the full release, which they haven't had time, well, haven't seen yet, but are looking forward to. So we'll cover blocks in a bit more detail next month's user group when we've all got access to it. The whole hide in mobile construct, so you can see there, I've just tried to highlight what that's going to look like. Keeping in mind, guys, you won't see this in your instance of Eloqua till the middle of May. And there's a question here from Alex. When building a campaign, I can see that one of the steps you can include is landing page reporting only. Do I need to include this? Well, if you want consolidated reporting, the answer is yes. So why would you want that? Okay, so when you're sending out looking at the campaign canvas, email goes out. In that email, there's a link to a landing page. You'll notice that Eloqua drops a small icon to the right of the email. Whenever you see that, you absolutely want to double click on it and then add it to the canvas. And then you'll probably need to repeat the process if there's a form attached to the landing page. That means that when you look at campaign reporting, any landing page or form engagement in the context of that campaign will be consolidated in your reporting. However, if you don't add them to the canvas, when you look at the campaign reports, you won't see any landing page activity and you won't see any form submission behavior as well. So generally the answer is yes, but not always, which is why the option. I personally always do it. I can't think of why I wouldn't want it, but that option is there. So this is the hide in mobile, as I said. So you'll be able to switch between your full and mobile view here, as you're probably doing hopefully already. And when you realize that that just doesn't quite work, then you'll be able to hide in mobile, and then vice versa, hide in desktop as well. So exciting times. People have been asking for that one, so that one's good to see. You'll also see in the middle of May, once we get to the next release, just some slight cosmetic changes to the user interface. So this is just giving you a little bit of a heads up as to what that's going to look like. Alrighty. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the user group for this month, and it's just on 11:58 a.m. So if you do have any other questions, please feel free to drop those into the Q&A box. I appreciate you making some time. I'll have a look over these in a bit more detail as well once the event's finished, and potentially come back to you individually, but I may also try and include some of those in the blog post, which will hopefully be done by the end of this week, early next week. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate you making some time to join us. As I said, I'm happy to stay here on the line for a few minutes if you do have any questions, and otherwise enjoy being at home. Go and grab a coffee. Hopefully you can get out to your local favorite cafe, takeaway only, and have a great rest of the week, and we'll be in touch. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.